we're going to kick things off. Very excited to be here today, and thanks everyone for joining. We really appreciate your time. We have an awesome webinar ahead of us today. My name's Jenna. I'm going to be the host alongside the speakers, Jason and Curtis. Today, Jason and Curtis are going to be talking all about building a culture of recognition for a distributed team. Personally, I think this is such an important topic, and I'm really excited to learn even more on this today. For the webinar today, it's presented to you by Bucket List Rewards, the #1 employee recognition platform out there. And we're very grateful today for HRCI having us here. Before we kick things off, I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping items and then we'll get right to it. At the end of the presentation, we're going to have a Q&A, so please feel free to utilize the chat box throughout the presentation today, but also we'll have that Q&A at the end. We'll get to as many questions as we can given our time frame. We're also going to have some polls throughout the webinar, and we would love your engagement as we love your thoughts and feedback. It's super important to us. The HRCI credit is also going to be toward the end of the webinar. And for everyone out there, this is going to be recorded and we'll definitely share it with you. So feel free to revisit it at any point and share it with anyone who you think might benefit from any of the information. With that said, I'm very excited to officially introduce our speakers today. We have Jason Lindstrom. Hi, Jason. Thanks for being here. Super excited to have you. I'm just going to talk a little bit about you here. Jason is the founder and CEO of Bucket List Rewards. He's had the chance to work with hundreds of organizations, everything from Fortune 100 to startups. He's worked with clients like Royal Bank of Canada, NFL, and other multinational tech companies and hospitals, just to name a few. Jason's very passionate about building strong workplace culture, and he's looking forward to sharing his tips and tricks here with us today. Alongside Jason, we also have Curtis Stieksma with us. Hey, Curtis, thanks so much for being here. Curtis has held leadership positions for the past 15 years. He's a really passionate people leader. He's also worked with Fortune 100 companies like Microsoft. Curtis has traveled and delivered speaking engagements in over 20 US states. Not to mention, he's a former touring rock star signed to label, which is awesome. With all of that said, I'm going to pass things over to Jason. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. We're so excited for today, and we hope you enjoy.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for the warm intro there, Jenna. And I know Curtis and I are really excited about sharing all our kind of favorite tools and tips on a topic that's very near and dear to our hearts. And with that, I thought I'd throw up a question on the screen, which is, what is our experience with distributed work? And personally, I deeply enjoy helping people and companies succeed. And today, I'm really looking forward to sharing my favorite ideas, tools, and tips on how we've built a high-performing distributed workplace. My hope is that everyone here is going to be able to walk away from today's session with somewhere between 1 and 5 great ideas that you can get started with today. And at the end of the session, I'm going to be asking, what was your favorite takeaway? So as something comes up that you think's useful or relevant, just put a pin in that, and we'd love to hear from you at the end. I think a good place to start with is by asking the question, what is our experience with distributed work? I would say we've had a fair amount of success with this. And by we, I mean Bucket List Rewards. So Bucket List, we're a distributed team now. We have employees located in countries all over the world. But for the past 3 years, our revenue growth has been over 3,000%. We recently did an employee net promoter score where we asked, how likely are you to refer a friend to work at Bucket List? And our average score was a 9.6 out of 10. And one other thing we're pretty darn proud of is Bucket List was recently recognized as one of the top 50 best companies to work for in Canada. Having said all that, we don't claim to be perfect. I don't claim to have all the answers. And as I share tips and ideas in today's session, some of you may already be doing some of these, but my hope is that there's some good takeaways for everybody on the call. And one other thing to note is we're going to talk a lot about recognition and building connections inside of the workplace, but we're also going to be sharing some strategies just in general on how to build a high-performing culture in a distributed or remote environment. And then one bonus resource, I love to give away free tips, free ebooks. We actually wrote an ebook on employee recognition and rewards. And if you want a copy, just type yes to the chat window. Sorry. Excellent audience participation, everybody. It's blowing up with yeses. Yes, please. You must be Canadian. I love the manners there.
You're going to be sending out a lot of emails to follow up with this, Jason.
Indeed, overall. Okay, fantastic. Well, triple exclamation mark. Okay, yeah, awesome. I'm very excited to share this ebook. And of course, today's session, as Jenna mentioned up front, will be recorded. So there will be some good takeaways there as well. Cool. So let's get into the agenda. What are we going to be talking about? I'm going to take just a few minutes to define the different types of work environments and to share a couple of fun facts around why remote and distributed work is so important. But really, we're going to be spending the majority of time talking about the 4 ways to build the best culture for a distributed workforce. And let's get into it. So I'm going to ask a kind of a big picture question here. Do employees want flexibility in their work environment? And maybe if you want to use that chat window again, anybody want to take a guess as to what % of remote capable employees expect to be working exclusively remote or in a hybrid situation moving forward? 80%, 70%, 60, whew. Amazing group. I love our audience participation. You guys are a really smart group. I sort of see between 50 to 80%. It turns out it's 77%. Very smart, very brilliant of you. And then one other kind of fun fact regarding remote or distributed work is if you were to ask employee when it comes to compensation, how important is flexibility? It turns out right after salary, having a flexible work schedule is number 1 on people's lists, or in this case, number 2. And it stands above health insurance, vacation time, retirement benefits, skills and training, 4-day work week, equity in a company, and paid parental leave. What I find kind of funny, not funny, but is right now at Bucket List, we're investing a lot of time and effort building out an employee stock option program. And I'm sure some people are going to love it and value it, but it turns out it's number 8 on the list. But having said all that, why don't we take just a few moments to briefly talk about the different types of working environment. What I think is relevant is at Bucket List, we've actually had the opportunity to go through the journey of traveling through all 4 quadrants. And we've had a chance to kind of experience the pros and cons of each different sector. So up in the top left, I have on-site. What does that mean? This is just a traditional way to work where everyone comes into the office at set hours, normally from Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Then number 2, which is a hybrid. This is where a company has an office and some days are in an on-site space and some days are remote. Then we have 3, which is a remote work environment. This is where a company does not have an office at all. Everyone works remotely all the time. And then you have number 4, which is a distributed environment where the team can have hybrid or remote options with no central locations, meaning people can work from anywhere. And that's actually where Bucket List is today. We have employees in a number of different countries. We have some shared office space and a whole bunch of people working remote as well. And we're going to be sharing all sorts of tips and best practices on that next. The 4 big areas we're going to be covering is how to set employees up for success. Curtis will be talking about the importance of building human connections. He's also going to walk you through on some best practices and tips on how to recognize people. And then we'll wrap it up with some innovative ways you can work together successfully. And why don't we start off with number 1, which is setting employees up for success. And I'm going to take just a few moments to share some tips around some fundamentals on why this is important and how to do it. So what does every distributed employee need to succeed? So some of the fundamentals include things like good equipment. So things like a monitor, maybe a standing desk, a chair, maybe noise canceling headset. These might sound kind of obvious. And when I say fundamental, you might be like, huge check mark, we've already done this. But I wanted to share just a short story on why I think this is so relevant. About 7 years ago, before COVID, we had done an employee engagement survey, and we actually had some low scores on work environment. The management team was pretty rattled because we're used to quite high scores for the employee engagement surveys. And we did a deep dive into the data, and it turns out that people primarily were just asking for better chairs. So as a company, we went out and bought a whole bunch of new chairs. We then resurveyed our team, and almost universally the scores had dramatically improved. And so why is this story relevant? I just think if this can happen in an in-office environment, it can certainly happen when people are working from remote environments, when they're working from home. So just be sure to set people up for success with good equipment. And also kind of closely tied to this is the idea of having the right workspace, making sure that there's a really clear boundaries between work life and personal life. Next, I want to talk a little bit about providing your team with the right daily structures and providing structure around availability and accountability. So I think it's super important to have clear expectations defined upfront with your remote distributed team. For us, we took the time to write a distributed work policy. We're actually going to open source this pretty soon and throw it up on our blog and share it with everybody. And in this distributed work policy, we clearly outline expectations around when people are expected to be available. For example, Bucket List primarily operates in a North American time zone. And with our collaborative culture, I think it's really important to have overlap of working hours where everyone is available for team meetings, regular check-ins with their leader, departmental updates. And so in summary, we have our core hours, which are between 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time. We actually have people pretty much working around the clock around the world just because they're in different time zones, but we do have a core set of hours defined up front. I was also at a talk by the chief operating officer of another organization that has a distributed team, and they're so distributed, they just define overlapping work hours by different functional teams. Next, I want to talk a little bit about, as a company, I think it's pretty darn important to provide a budget to set your people up for success. So what does that mean? We have tons of software that we buy for our staff, but I also think it's important to provide employees with a remote working budget that they can use to buy things like a better chair, as I mentioned previously, a desk, or whatever is important to them. And in my experience, I've seen companies do everything from providing $250 all the way up to $1,000 per year to cover the costs employees might incur by working from home. Again, I highly encourage you guys to set aside a little bit of budget for that. Next, I want to share a quote from a fellow named Robert Glazer. He's actually written a book on how to create a high performing work environment for distributed and remote teams. And I'm just going to take a second to read this quote because I think it's so darn important. So the number one issue that everyone is struggling with when switching to remote management is the idea of managing outcomes and not inputs. If you set clear metrics and your team is hitting those marks, you don't have to worry about how many hours they're spending or where they're doing their work. You're managing towards the outcomes that your organization needs. And this is something we've kind of deeply adopted here at Bucket List. If people have a clear idea of what success is, you have to worry way less about process and inputs. And next up, I'm going to be sharing just a few ideas on how to get focused on outcomes. So just one of the tools we use to shift from managing inputs to focusing outcomes is something called a job scorecard. This is a tool we use to recruit the right people into the job. And over on the right-hand side, you can see a sample job scorecard. This is for a business sales director. It starts off with a mission, and in this case, it's to double revenue from business clients in 2 years. And then below that, you can see some really specific outcomes, which include things like growing revenue from 10 to 20 million by a specific date, growing existing accounts by 50%, building and leading a team of 15 salespeople. In summary, it provides a very specific details on exactly what's expected from specific team members up front. What's kind of cool is we use this right from the job recruitment level. So upfront, people are really clear on what's expected from them. And then we weave it into a whole bunch of other systems and processes, things like weekly one-to-one between team leads and team members. We weave it into things like company goal setting, and we use things called OKRs. However, this is just one way to focus on outcomes. And in a few moments, I'm going to be talking about and sharing a few more ideas. Next, I want to talk about the importance of effective hiring and onboarding. And this is always an important theme, whether you have a traditional working environment or whether you're distributed. We've done just a ton to ensure a great onboarding process for new employees. And two of my favorite tactics include taking the time to map out the employee onboarding experience to ensure that you have a really great first impression. And so what do I mean by that? Is we've actually surveyed employees right from their first phone screening all the way to making an offer to their first 30 days at our organization. And in summary, you want to identify where you're performing really well and maybe not so well. And then any area that needs improvement, you can lift up and create consistency with systems and processes. And I see a couple of people commenting that they can't see anything on screen. Just a quick question maybe for Curtis or Jenna. Can you guys see what's on screen right now?
Everything looks okay from my side. There have been 2 people in the chat that, okay, looks like everyone's
Okay,
saying
yeah,
they can
I
see.
can see
So
everything as well.
Fantastic.
Okay.
for those that are having trouble, maybe try popping out of the meeting and just coming back in. We are recording, of course, so happy to send this afterwards so you can have the visualization as well.
Awesome. And this is actually beautifully in the spirit of distributed work. How many times have people been on a call where you ask, can you hear me? Can you see me? And the answer is no, despite being your 300th Zoom call. So anyways, cool. I'm glad the majority of you can see and hear everything quite smoothly. Cool. So just to recap, it's really important to map out your entire onboarding experience and identify where you're strong and weak and then fix any weaknesses. And then second, and perhaps more importantly, I think it's really important to survey all employees at key intervals to ensure that you provided both a great onboarding experience and just a good experience in general. For example, at Bucket List, we typically survey staff at the 30-day mark to recap how their onboarding has been. And we've scored quite high on that, normally around a 9.7. And I think we've been able to achieve those results because we took so much time up front to map everything out. And then lastly, I highly recommend checking out the book, Who, the A Method for Hiring. This book was written by a fellow named Jeff Smart, and he describes how most hiring managers only have a 50% success rate of recruiting A players. However, if you deploy his systems and processes, you can increase your chances to 90% of recruiting A players. And that job scorecard is actually an idea from that book that I had mentioned in the previous slide. Awesome. Next, I want to take just a few moments to talk about how to run a well-run and efficient meeting. Over at Bucket List, we do something called an L10 meeting, which stands for level 10. It's from something called EOS, which stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. And if you Google L10 or Google EOS, you should see a whole bunch of deeper information on this topic. But in summary, L10 meetings are really designed to be focused and solution-oriented. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the recurring agenda that we use, and I'm going to take just a few moments to walk through it. So normally we start off by talking about good news. There's nothing better than starting off on the tone of positive and uplifting news. Then we review our scorecard. These are some of the key numbers we use to run our business. And again, we focus a lot on outcomes. We then review people and client headlines. For example, maybe a staff member is getting married. Perhaps we've got a cool new client that's joined up. Then we review the issues list. And this is where we spend the majority of time. And the goal is really to talk about what I like to call elephants in the room, rotten fish, which is legacy items, or sometimes people just need to vomit things and get them off their chest. What I'm trying to really communicate here with these silly metaphors is it's really important to have authentic and meaningful conversation and to always get at the deeper heart of the issue. And Anna said, gross, LOL. I would agree. And then something kind of fun at the end of the meeting, we ask all attendees to score the meeting out of 10. If anybody gives an 8 or less, you have to explain why you gave it an 8 or less and what you do differently to raise the quality of the meeting moving forward. And why do we do all this? I'm sure a lot of us have joined calls or joined meetings where there's not good takeaways, there's no clear outcomes, and the intent of an L10 is to create focused, highly meaningful and impactful meetings. Awesome. So I'm going to turn it over to Curtis at this point, and he's going to walk us through how to build human connections.
Thanks so much, Jason. And I just want to make one quick point on the L10 meetings. I know we always score a little higher too if everyone can end the meeting right on time. So, keeping a tight ship is really important for those meetings, just keeping them focused and concise. Okay, so I'm very excited to chat with you all today. Thanks again for having me, guys. The first piece we're going to jump into here is building human connections in the workplace. And this is really one of the most crucial things to consider when your employees are in a distributed environment. Ultimately, how do we keep people connected? So I want to take this section of the presentation to just talk a little bit about what that looks like and ultimately share sort of the value in finding ways of doing that. So to illustrate this point, I wanted to reference Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you're not familiar with it, this is essentially a very well understood model of basic human behavior and fundamental needs. And if you look at the pyramid on the slide here, you're going to notice at the bottom that you'll see our physiological needs. So that's going to be things like basic necessities, food, shelter, etc. And you'll see safety above that, all about feeling secure and safe in your environment. And then above that, you're going to see belongingness, love, and esteem. And this is all about developing personal relationships. You know, it's about feeling a sense of community, purpose, and accomplishment. And what this ultimately tells us is that we've actually evolved to need these things in order to function. Human beings all desire connection, and this includes both in our social environments and, of course, in our professional ones as well. So with that in mind, there's some really awesome and easy strategies and processes that you can introduce to help keep your employees feeling connected in a distributed workplace. One of those things would be something like a weekly stand-up. So for us here at Bucket List, we do these meetings on Mondays and Fridays. And basically the way it works is we break up our employees into grouped meeting rooms. And on Monday, each employee in each room will share their work and personal goals that they've mapped out for the week. On Friday, those same groups reconvene and they share the progress towards those goals that they outlined at the beginning of the week. So I know that that sounds super simple. And the truth is it is, but it's effective because it really allows to insight into not only what our colleagues are working on this week, but also their personal interests and hobbies. So it helps to build those connections. You know, maybe they're working on a big project that they're stuck on, and maybe there's a way that I can help them. And I discovered that through this meeting, or maybe there's something really awesome and exciting to them in their personal life coming up. It's a great way for employees to get to know each other, stay connected. You know, a couple of examples off the top of my head here. I know our lead developer, or one of our lead developers, Mark, is currently learning how to speak Spanish. He's already bilingual, so this would be his third language, which is pretty cool. And I also learned through these meetings that one of my colleagues, Katie, like me, absolutely loves horror movies. And we actually got the chance to book like a separate meeting to talk a little bit about that and share some movie recommendations and stuff. So it was a really cool way for me to establish a connection with her. And ultimately, it's just a really great way for employees to get to know each other, their personal interests. It also creates visibility into the awesome work happening at your company. And I know personally, I love these meetings because it allows me to get to know my coworkers, especially as we're growing. If I can't see them in person and have those water cooler conversations, this is a great alternative. One of the other important things to keep in mind when you're trying to build human connections in the workplace is to make people laugh. There's been a lot of research that supports the idea that laughing together and ultimately humor in general actually makes us feel more connected. So if you can try, make your meetings fun, you know, slip in a dad joke like Jason does in almost every meeting we have, or a funny GIF or anything else that you can do to make people smile. And I think this is really all about just creating common ground, right? There are a lot of ways that you can do this in the workplace, you know, even outside of meetings. So for example, you can see on the screen there was a screenshot of our Slack environment. We use that for instant messaging. And at the top, there's a question, when did you have your first donut and what type was it? You can see it sparked a conversation below. We had a few different departments kind of jumping in and commenting on it. So something really simple, but a nice way to break up that normal conversation and encourage your employees to talk to each other without it always having to be work related. Because again, we want to create those social connections. Another cool idea to think about is finding ways to schedule social events of some kind. Even in a virtual environment, there's some really cool things that you can do. For example, at Bucket List, something that we did a couple of weeks ago that was a hit was a digital escape room. I'd never done anything like that before personally. I had done some in-person like physical escape rooms, and they're always a lot of fun. But this was new, doing it in a virtual environment. And basically, we all kind of broke out into separate groups. We got a series of clues, a time limit, and we had to solve a mystery. We're pretty competitive at Bucket List, so it was really cool to see afterwards of the discussion, you know, for those people that were able to solve the mystery, those people that got stuck, and kind of comparing notes amongst teams. It was a really cool way for us all to come together. I highly recommend doing things like this. It doesn't necessarily have to be a digital escape room, of course. There's some cool ideas floating in the chat that I'm seeing here as well. So it could be things like trivia. The suggestion in the chat was Jackbox games. Love that. Pictionary. Family Feud, which sidebar, I love Family Feud, so I'm really excited when Bucket List gets the opportunity to do that because I'm gonna win. So take notes, guys. So in summary, there's a few brief ideas here that will hopefully help you kind of think of some of the simple things that you can do at your company to help build human connections. It's absolutely vital in a distributed work environment because it's tied into our psychological needs. Of course, it's important to have fun. So these are some really easy and important processes that you can use to build and maintain those relationships amongst your peers. The next piece that I wanted to talk about is the power and importance of recognizing your people. So fundamentally, when you recognize your staff for doing great work, you'll see a direct impact on things like voluntary turnover, reducing that as much as up to 40%. You'll also see things like an increase in employee engagement, which is of course going to affect things like productivity and overall company morale. So recognizing people is extremely important if you want to create an awesome workplace culture, even when you can't be together physically. And just to further emphasize this point, if you think about all of the top performing companies and brands we know, companies like Google, Disney, even the US military, they all have amazing employee recognition strategies in place. So let's talk about why recognition works. By recognizing your people, you can make work feel more meaningful for them. It's a powerful vehicle to give your employees a sense of purpose and accomplishment. And if we dig a little deeper into that, I think this quote from Frank Blake does an excellent job summarizing it. So he says, when you recognize people for extraordinary work and you tell a story, everyone remembers that moment. The person you recognize is thrilled and everybody else is thinking, I want a story told about me too. Now, if you don't know Frank, he's the former chairman of and CEO of Home Depot, and he's responsible for turning around the organization during a financial crisis, growing it to many $billion in revenue. So let's just say he knows what he's talking about, and he's done a really great job here tapping into the psychological needs that we highlighted in Maslow's hierarchy. The last piece of this quote is extremely important because storytelling is what makes something memorable. In fact, research suggests that a story is 22 times more memorable than hard facts. And if you think about this from your own experience, you probably can remember moments in your life when you heard great stories. Maybe they were shared by friends around a campfire, perhaps after an adult beverage or 2 or 3, maybe. And maybe those stories were about, a first love or a trip to Thailand, the story of a first tattoo, or maybe something like an important life lesson. I know that I've personally learned so much about the people in my life through storytelling. An example that jumps to mind for me is my grandpa. When I was a teenager, I remember talking to him about his experience in the Second World War. And it was like no conversation I had ever had before. It was really powerful for me. And the reason that storytelling is so powerful is because if you didn't know this already, people tend to forget things pretty quickly. And I don't know about you, but my memory seems to be getting a little bit worse as I get older. So what we're looking at on the slide here is something called the forgetting curve, which describes what people remember after a learning event. And what you'll find is that within the first hour, most people forget about 44% of the information presented to them, which is a big yikes. And that means that most of you are actually going to forget roughly half of what we say today by the end of this webinar. Good reason we're recording it. But all the more reason that it's important that we use the tools at our disposal, like storytelling, when we're sharing information that we want people to remember, like when you're highlighting when someone has done a really great job at your company. So how do we make an impactful and memorable story? Well, there's a very specific storytelling format that we all fundamentally understand, and it's called the hero's journey. All of our best fiction follows the hero's journey format. So if you think about characters like Luke Skywalker, Harry Potter, Daenerys Targaryen, all of these characters have really great stories because they all follow that hero's journey. This format for storytelling is extremely effective because it makes the story memorable, inspirational, and relatable. And in fact, I'm willing to bet that as I shared those 3 character names with you, it conjured up images in your head of the books or movies that you've seen about them. So how do we tell a hero's journey story through the lens of something like employee recognition? Well, it's actually really easy. First thing you have to do is start by selecting an employee, identify a challenge or problem that they encountered, explain how they rose to the occasion and overcame that challenge, and then share the outcome. And if you follow this simple process, by anchoring your employee recognition to a hero's journey story, you're going to make it more memorable for everyone who's listening. Okay, so now that we understand the power of storytelling, particularly from the top down, coming from leadership or management, let's explore the value in allowing employees to do this for each other as well. Peer-to-peer recognition is a powerful way to develop an organic sense of community across the organization. And it honestly is an invaluable tool if you're working in a distributed environment. Because the truth is, a lot of managers and leaders are actually going to miss the great work that's being performed by employees at the ground level. So if you empower your employees to recognize each other as this great work happens, it's a huge win. You're going to create visibility, connectivity, and encourage relationship building. All of the research on this confirms that if you allow employees to recognize one another, you're going to see a massive lift in overall employee engagement. And we also have the data to support that here at Bucket List for all of our clients. Another strategy that I would recommend when you're thinking about recognition is to ensure that all recognition can be tied back to core company values. Recognizing employees for demonstrating values is super powerful because it helps employees feel connected to the company mission and vision. So in other words, you're going to give them that deeper sense of purpose, which we touched on earlier today. And purpose-oriented employees reported 64% higher levels of fulfillment in their work. So there's a ton of value in including core values or core company values in your recognition strategy. So in summary, recognizing employees for great work is an excellent way to affect workplace culture in a distributed environment. And there are a few key ways to make that impactful. The first would be to make your recognition timely. In the moment recognition is always going to be more valuable than something that comes weeks after. The second is to be specific and ideally tell a mini story that follows the hero's journey, because that will instill memory for the recognition across the employee base. The third would be to do it frequently, because as we saw with the forgetting curve, people do tend to forget information pretty fast. And so one of the best ways that we can make sure that we address that is to increase the frequency that these things happen. And then finally, tie it into core values so that it encourages the behaviors you want to see. Now, before I pass this back to Jason, there's one other thing that I wanted to talk about, and that is employee rewards. This often comes up as a discussion point when we're sharing information about employee recognition. So I thought I'd take a few quick moments to share best practices with you. High level, your employee rewards, if you choose to offer them, need to feel personalized and individual. The idea here is that you want to create a memorable moment for your employee, allowing it to become something amazing that they always associate with your company. And if you think about it, this comes back to storytelling, right? I had a friend recently who shared his experience with rewards for a company that he worked with. A former employer gave him a cheese knife as an employee reward, which, like, okay, I guess that's cool if you're, putting your charcuterie together. But his new employer gave him a helicopter ride with his kids. So what do you think he enjoyed more? What do you think that he told other people when it came to sharing information about the types of rewards that he received? Of course, it was a helicopter ride. So the best way to think about the types of rewards that your employees would potentially love is to simply ask them. You could put together a survey, for example, if you're not already doing this. At Bucket List, we've surveyed thousands of employees across our customer base. And the best rewards are always tailored to exactly what the employees want. So with that in mind, there's a couple quick examples on the slide here of some really awesome rewards that we've seen. Things like, obviously paid time off is popular. We've seen people go whitewater rafting, kayaking. If you've got a really fun culture, we have a couple of customers that have created a reward where the CEO calls your mom and tells her what a great employee you are. That might really hit with, Gen Z and younger millennials. So just a lot of really cool, fun ideas that you can create in your platform. The idea is just making it feel fun and making it impactful. And if you want to take that one step further, we do something really cool here at Bucket List. It may not be a fit for everyone, but it is really popular with us. And I've seen it work for other organizations as well. So I figured I would share this. One of the best ways that you can help an employee experience something really personal or individual from a rewards perspective is to help them realize a goal or dream. So we have a benefit program here at Bucket List called the Bucket List Benefit. And basically what it entails is each employee getting up to $500 annually to put towards a dream or goal. And they also get a paid day off to enjoy that, whatever it happens to be. So I'll give a quick example. One of our employees, Maddie, just moved out to the West Coast. And she's a massive passion for the outdoors. So one of her goals in moving out here was to be able to spend more time in the wilderness in the Pacific Northwest. So doing things like camping and hiking. But that gear is, of course, expensive. And so part of her bucket list benefit allowed us to help her get some hiking and camping equipment. And then we gave her the extra day off, of course, so she could extend her weekend. And she was able to have a really awesome camping trip. You can see some of the pictures on the slide here. I know she had a super great time. It meant a lot to her. And she was also a newer employee at Bucket List at the time. So that really created an awesome connection to the organization for her. It was a small gesture of appreciation, but it really made her feel special. So this is a great way to build connection with your employees. And ultimately, when it comes to rewards, the simplest advice I can give you is just make it meaningful. So hopefully that gives you some ideas. And Jason, I think with that, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, awesome walkthrough of the importance of building connection and how to do recognition. And a few tweaks to this employee dream program that Curtis just walked through is you don't have to give out $500. You don't necessarily have to give out a full day. Maybe you just do a paid day off, for example, and you give them a small stipend towards a tutorial to help them learn something new and fun on their own. Maybe it's like Mark, maybe it's who's on our team and it's learning a new language. It doesn't have to be complicated to have a deep level of impact. The program Curtis did walk through with you has been received with rave reviews, but my key takeaway here is you can tweak it to make it be a fit for your own organization. Awesome. Next, I'm going to talk about ways you can innovate to work together successfully. That's our last and final point here. And I want to start off by talking about the importance of tools and technologies. Up front, I mentioned that we do use a ton of software here at Bucket List, and they are very, very impactful and useful for making our team feel connected. Some of our favorite tools include things like Slack. We use Asana, obviously Google Drive, Zoom, HubSpot, and Donut, just to name a few. But there's a huge number of other tools that you can investigate to bring your team together. One of the fun ones that was kind of informally mentioned previously is Donut. Donut's a pretty darn cool tool. Its primary use case is to provide or create serendipitous connections between different people inside of an organization. The way it works is you plug it into Slack, and it invites two people who may not work together to connect for a short conversation. You can even prompt those conversations with some feeder questions. And it's just a cool way for different people around the company to get to know one another. Next, I'm going to talk just a little bit about goal set and reviews. This is just a fancy way or a fancy title we've given to weekly one-to-ones between the team lead and the team member. In this meeting, the team lead and the employee will cover the 3-month goals, weekly goals, recurring questions, and we always leave time for open discussion. And to dig one level deeper, here's a screenshot of some of the questions that we ask on a weekly basis. I love these questions because they do, in fact, create much deeper connection between and amongst different team members. I'm going to highlight just a couple of my favorite questions from the slide. One of them is, what's the best thing that happened to you this week, either at work or outside of it? I've learned just a huge amount about my team by asking this question. I've had people tell me about their upcoming wedding. I've had team members tell me about their kids getting scholarships. I've had people talk about their upcoming baby that they're expecting, in this case in September. Is this an awesome way to learn about whatever's meaningful with your colleague? Next, I love asking the question on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you and why? So I think a lot of times in life we go through and ask people, hey, how are you doing? And they might respond with something like fine. But fine is a pretty vague answer. It doesn't really let you know what's happening in someone's life. For example, they might be going through a divorce. They might be struggling to pay rent. But when you ask for a number out of 10, you get rid of the vagueness and you get down to the real meaningful conversation. A couple of things to note. Normally, if people have a low score, it means something is significantly wrong. And as a leader, it gives you a chance to step in and remove barriers, whether those are barriers at work or at home. Another takeaway is you'll very quickly find out what people's average score is. For example, some people tend to be a 7 out of 10 on average. Some people are a 9 out of 10 on average. But if people dip below their norm, normally something, again, is really meaningful happen in their life. And it could be an indication of a potential flight risk, meaning they might not be happy in their job. So again, as a leader, it gives you the opportunity to step in and help whatever barriers might be impacting them either at work or at home. And then the last fun question, and this is in the spirit of recognition, is what were some great contributions made by other team members? And just in the spirit of great leadership, I always believe it's important to give people a chance to push credit out to their colleagues. And this is a great way to do so. One other item we do that I think is really important, and this again goes to focusing on outcomes, not inputs, is being really clear about your company goals and objectives. We use something called OKRs, which stands for Objective Key Results. And typically we'll identify annual OKRs, and then we'll identify quarterly OKRs. And these are shared amongst the team members, and we provide status updates every month and a half or so. So across the entire organization, people know what the goals are on an annual basis, a quarterly basis, and they have a real clarity as to whether we're on track, off track, or totally sideways. And the result is a lot more meaningful work. Awesome. So we have indeed covered a ton of ground today. And in a few seconds, I'd love to ask you what you found most valuable from today's conversation. As I mentioned up front, my goal or vision for today's session is everybody walks away with sort of 1 to 5 takeaways. And I'd love to ask you to maybe put your answer into the chat window now. Here's just a few of the things we covered. We learned about the importance of flexibility at work, and that's the most important thing after compensation. We learned how to set employees up for success. We talked about just the importance of a distributed work policy, job scorecards, L10 meetings. We talked about, Curtis did a fantastic job walking through how to build human connections, whether that's weekly stand-ups, having fun, virtual events. And of course, we walked through recognition, why it's important, how to do peer-to-peer recognition best practices, and of course, how to innovate and how to innovate and have fun at work together. And some of the tools are the GSNR and OKRs. And I'm just loving all the ideas flying through here. Amazing. So it sounds to me like there's some good takeaways, which makes me so happy to hear. At the end of the day, Curtis, myself, and Jenna, like our whole intent is to add insane amount of value for everybody who's joined today's session. So in a few moments, I'm going to pop up a couple of poll questions. And give me a second here. The first question, to go one step deeper, where's my poll? What topics resonated with you most today? I'm going to launch that poll question. So this is kind of an elaboration of some of the comments you just threw in the chat window. Very cool. Tons of participation on this question.
This is awesome, guys. Lots of answers rolling in. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, wonderful. So let this run for about another 3 seconds, even though I see furious activity around. Thanks, Kathy. She gave you a 10 out of 10, Curtis, on human connection. I love it. So I'm going to end this.
Kathy.
Awesome. And then next up, I'd love to ask you, or change hats and put on my CEO role. And if you're interested in learning how to build a highly impactful employee rewards and recognition platform, Bucketlist is in fact ranked #1 in this space. We can help you with a peer-to-peer program, with manager spot bonuses, employee anniversaries, performance rewards. And of course, we can help even with things like creating an employee dreams program. So I'm going to launch the survey, which says, would you like a demo for Bucketlist Rewards? And if you're interested, go ahead and click yes. We have a bunch of amazing account executives who can also share best practices, tips in the space. And we're also happy to share ebooks and further information if you're interested.
Yeah,
So
I should. Sorry, Jay, can I add one quick comment?
Absolutely.
Just awesome. Thank you. You'd mentioned that the answer to this is to see a demo. Of course, obviously love to show everyone the product. We're also happy to just have a conversation around your employee recognition strategy today and just see if there's some tips we can provide.
Celeste, I saw in the chat window, Canada rocks, very progressive. Thank you. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. And we'll open it up to Q&A in just a moment here. Oh, cool. So lastly, this is, of course, an HRCI accredited session. And for those of you who dialed in, the activity ID is 601881. I'll say that one more time, 601881. And with that, we can jump over to Q&A. Up on screen, you can see the LinkedIn profile for Curtis and myself. We always love to connect. If you want to connect, hit us up with any additional questions. Please feel free to do so. And with that in mind, maybe Jenna can guide us through. Questions.
Thanks both of you. What an awesome presentation. Learned so much today. I love this topic, and I feel like you can never learn enough, and it's always growing and evolving, and it's always so great to always be learning. So thanks both of you. It was fantastic. So yeah, we're going to get to our Q&A. So please feel free to utilize that chat box. We've already got some questions coming in. One person was wondering, in those stand-up meetings, do you include on-site employees?
I can grab that if you like. Well, here at Bucket List, we are a complete distributed model. So, typically people aren't going into an on-site facility unless it's something that's a shared facility that we booked ahead of time. But I would say in my experience, it's cool if you can combine those things. So definitely, if you've got a physical office and people are going in that environment, it'd be really cool if, let's say you've got a boardroom, you can have all of your remote employees or distributed employees broadcasted on a TV, and then all of your physical employees that are in office in that boardroom, and then sharing that same experience together. So I would say ideally, if you've got people in a physical office, yeah, of course, include them.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Curtis. We had another question here regarding those weekly kind of check-ins, the GSR. Do you speak with each employee on a weekly basis, or do you use a survey or some other tool? So is this like a weekly touch point that happens?
Yeah, great question. So it is a weekly virtual face-to-face between the team lead, the team member, and it does happen between every single team lead and all the team members. And it's done, in our case, because we're distributed, is done via Zoom, cameras on, and it does happen on a weekly basis. I've seen companies stretch this out to longer intervals. My bias is I think it's life happens on a weekly basis. So you always want to stay in front of whatever might be building up. And weirdly, sometimes something really impactful might happen, but then a week and a half passes, 2 weeks pass. And like that, even though it was a critically important thing, it kind of fades away. And so it may not come up. And so in summary, I love the weekly cadence. It seems to serve us and work really well for us. And I know a bunch of other companies that do this as well. And the last thing is I'm a big fan of momentum. And I think if you can remove barriers on a weekly basis, you're setting yourself and your team up for success.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jason. We had another question. For a smaller company that's working very hard to try and implement any of these things, do you have any suggestions for the wonderful ideas that you've shared today if the company's smaller?
Yeah. We've worked with, oh, sorry, Jason, did you want to?
You go for Curtis first.
Thank you, sir. So at Bucket List here, we work with companies, of course, of all shapes and sizes, everything from, I think, tens and tens of thousands to, I think the smallest one I've personally worked with is about 5 or 10 employees. And of course, when you're working with a smaller organization, budgets are always a concern. So if budgets are a big concern, getting creative around, those things like the CEO calls your mom, or the paid time off, or maybe it's a VIP parking spot if you've got a production facility. There's some really cool rewards that you could bake into an employee recognition program that would allow your employees to still feel kind of incentivized without having to spend a ton of money on it. But ultimately, I think, the recognition piece is just absolutely crucial. So even if you didn't have a rewards program in place per se, allowing for people to receive recognitions for the great work they're doing would still be valuable within a smaller organization.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. To recap what I heard the question being is, if we're a smaller company will these ideas work for us, and where should we maybe start? What I'd recommend is, a lot of times with small organizations, I think, as Curtis was just saying, recognition works all the time, every time, whether you're small or big. And one of the fastest ways to get that kicked off is just to set up, again, a regular recurring meeting, whether that's a weekly all hands meeting or a monthly fireside chat. Just connect with your people, recognize the great work that's happening there. And then in terms of impact and levers, I'd highly recommend, as a company, setting yearly and quarterly OKRs, building those with your team members and sharing whatever they may be with your team, and providing regular progress updates, just because that'll create alignment. And I think alignment, whether you're a small company or a massive company, is one of the most critical things to becoming successful. And then hot on the heels of that, I would do weekly GSNRs with all the team members as well, just to create those meaningful connections and to remove barriers, and again, create momentum inside the organization.
Thanks so much, Curtis and Jason. There was a couple of questions similar to this one here. Would you have any tips or recommendations for engaging introverted or shy employees?
You gonna let me jump on that one? Okay.
Yeah, I was going to let you go for a second.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't tell everyone today, I'm very shy and introverted personally. So no, I mean, I think you need to understand your people, right? And so some people love really public praise and recognition. Some people like to have it privately. And I think, coming back to the idea of sort of the psychological safety, right? Allowing people to be comfortable in the environment that they're in, you need to understand them a little bit more. So sometimes for those more kind of shy and introverted people, they will still love recognition, but they don't want it shouted from a rooftop. And in an example like that, I would say, just make sure that the kind of manager, or that the person that individual directly reports into, is regularly recognizing them, regularly having those weekly meetings with them and things like that. It just doesn't have to be sort of as public or broadcasted across the organization. Anything to add to that, Jason?
No, I think that was awesome, man. Great summary.
I'm just going to answer this one quickly. Yes, we're going to be sharing the slides, so you'll be able to revisit or share this with anyone else after the presentation. How can you tell whether the culture that a company has built is resonating?
I think probably the easiest way is to survey your team. And there's a ton of great tools out there. On the more affordable side, there's SurveyMonkey, which actually does have pre-built employee engagement surveys and pulse surveys. And they even provide some benchmarking, so you can see how you're ranking against, other tech companies or other financial companies. It's pretty cool. And then there's more robust tools like Culture Amp. So there's a bunch of tools out there that you can roll out to quickly find out how you're performing and whether your culture is resonating. And then additionally, I think as a team lead or as a CEO, doing asking those questions from the GSNR to dig deeper, to find out whether people enjoy working at your company, to find out where their setbacks are. I think that's another really meaningful way to collect firsthand stories from your team. The surveys are better because it gives you data, it's more comprehensive, and it touches base with your entire company. What's super interesting is, and I've observed, as your company scales, you have some teams that have great cultures. Maybe your dev team is just crushing it. They have great leadership. The team's well aligned, the core values, they're having a lot of fun. And then maybe on the finance side, they just don't hang out or talk to each other, and maybe there's poor leadership there. Anyways, a survey will help you dig in to see where your company's thriving and maybe not thriving so well. So that's my 2 cents.
I just want to give a quick shout out to Wendy in the chat here. She just gave a really awesome suggestion. So when it comes to surveying, she said she sent out a survey using humor and got more responses than she normally would have received with sort of our traditional surveys. That's such a good tip. And, it comes back to something we talked about today, right? Make it fun. So nice. Thank you for sharing that, Wendy.
Thanks, Wendy. And thank you for that, Jason. We had another question here. Someone was just wondering if we could chat a little bit about the difference between remote versus distributed.
Yeah, for sure. So the simplest way to describe it is remote just means you do not have a physical office. Distributed means your company is located all around the world. You might have some physical offices in some geographies and some might be remote. So distributed means you're geographically dispersed, and you may or may not have physical offices as well. I saw a question here, speaking of distributed work, does Bucket List work with global companies? 100%. We have companies or customers in over 70 different countries around the world. So yeah, we and rewards in just as many locations as well. So we're happy to work with anybody around the world.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question here. What's your favorite part about being on a distributed team?
I think Curtis or Jenna should go first on this one.
I was going to say, Jenna, why don't you tell us first, and then we can share our thoughts.
I love the flexibility it has to offer. And it's really like, I'm very introverted. I can be very shy as well. And personally, for me, this just works with the way that I function. I work better this way, and it personally works really well for me. And I still feel very connected to people. So even though I'm introverted, I'm still participating in everything in the remote environment, and it feels good. I get excited to wake up and go to work personally. How about you, Curtis?
Yeah, a great answer, and glad to hear all of that. I think I would certainly agree on the flexibility. I've worked in remote environments. I've worked in traditional in-office environments, hybrid. And I find just, having the ability to, in meetings, camera on, still kind of create that human connection. I find it also kind of forces me to carve out time to get to know people because I can't see them physically in person. So it's like, okay, Jenna, let's book a 15-minute just to get to know each other and talk about, your passions and interests, right? So I think it actually encourages human connection in kind of a weird way because it forces us to get to know our colleagues where we can't just do that in kind of a traditional office environment. So flexibility and the ability to perhaps get to know some people that I wouldn't normally if I was in a traditional office environment.
For sure. And just to add to that as well, I feel like I work a lot harder as well because there's goal setting, there's a lot of things involved. I feel excited and motivated to hit my metrics and things like that. So I just feel like all around it's a really great experience.
Awesome. And I think Curtis and Jenna, you guys did a great job describing some of the advantages of hybrid work. I'd only add that I love the work-life balance. Like I don't have to commute anymore, so I spend more time with my kids. I love my daughters; they're amazing. Mm-hmm. I'm back to my university, back to my university weight because I'm just exercising more. Right? There's a lot of really cool little perks that have come out of it, and I think it also provides a team with a really great and healthy work-life balance as well. And like the team is very important to me, not just like helping, not just building a great high performing company, but it's so awesome watching people thrive as individuals as well. So, but I think we're at time here, Jenna. What do you think?
Yes, we are. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in with us today. We really, really appreciate your time. We know your time is valuable. Jason and Curtis, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. We really hope that you got some takeaways. And again, this will be recorded and sent out afterwards. So I don't know if Jason and Curtis has anything to add before we sign off.
I would just thank everyone for their time. Awesome participation today, of course, which makes these super fun for us. So glad that you guys found value in this. Please do connect with us all on LinkedIn, by the way. We'd love to connect with you guys there and share some thoughts and get your feedback. But thank you, and I'll pass it to you, Jason.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And in the spirit of what Curtis mentioned earlier, we're going to end right on time here, crisply at the top of the hour. Have an amazing Tuesday, everybody. I'm so happy you guys got value out of this. Have a wonderful week. Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.